r/AskReddit. Serious, what was your oh no I'm dating a crazy person moment? Went on a date. Something just felt off, and he was very clingy, but I agreed to a second date, because I thought maybe he was nervous. I was 18, he said he was 22. Second date I felt really uncomfortable, but couldn't pinpoint why. He said he didn't have social media, but when I got back to my apartment I googled him. He wasn't 22, he was 28, and was a registered sex offender. I threw up, and was completely terrified. Compared to the more hilarious things, mine is a little more serious and depressing. My first serious relationship was in college, and at first she treated me well. After a while things turned emotionally abusive, but me being naive, and also easy to manipulate, I didn't see it. She turned me against a lot of my friends and family. Side note but important, my dad has been through some bad relationships in the past, including my mom. He's usually a very quiet person, and usually lets me figure out my mistakes on my own. My real wake up moment was when I was on the phone having a fight with her, and she was literally berating me, and my dad stomped into my room and shouted loud enough for her to hear, "This is not what you deserve, and she isn't worth it." I left her about a week later once I was able to get all my stuff from her apartment. When my calm, collected father gets involved I know something isn't right. She ended up getting into another relationship like 2 months after I left, and looking back on everything, she probably had some seriously unresolved PTSD from her childhood. I hope she got the help she needs, but I sure hope she isn't abusing her current S/O. When my best friend and I first met, we were kinda in a dating gray area, knowing we would never work as a couple, but still spending every spare moment together. She has bipolar disorder with psychosis. I knew this at the time, but I hadn't seen it in action yet. We would do this thing, where we would find a halfway point between our two apartments, and spend hours there talking. One night it was about 3 AM, ducking freezing, and we were sitting outside an old public library talking, and she was manic as duck, though I didn't quite recognize it as mania yet at the time. The library has these Egyptian relief carvings around the doors, and at one point she stopped talking, and got really quiet, and looked like she was spooked. I thought I said something wrong, so I got quiet too, and after a few moments of silence she said, "We have to go, because the Egyptians are moving." It took me a few seconds to realize that she was seeing the figures in the carvings move. She knew it wasn't real, and she was embarrassed and freaked out, but in hindsight it was a blessing, because it made her feel safe with me before the much worse things that were to come. That was 6 years ago. We lived together, platonically lol, and she is being treated for her illness and it's under control. I want to say I realized it as I was sitting on the windowsill of the second floor wondering if I would die if I hit the pavement. Thankfully I snapped back to reality and realized that I shouldn't sacrifice my happiness for a manipulative douche that forces me to work while he had no job, clean his house, and made me do humiliating things like dry him off after he takes a shower by saying pat pat and patting him with a towel. He seriously got pissed when I told him I wouldn't do it anymore, and said it was a sign that I loved him and he would think I didn't love him anymore if I didn't do it. I started planning my escape, since my parents lived a 12-hour drive away. I told them to get me 4 months from the time I texted them, because it would give me time to get out of there to a safe place, and I would send the safe address to them when they were ready to leave and drive to me. I waited till he fell asleep 3 days before they would be there, threw all my stuff into trash bags, and threw it off the back porch where a friend waited below with a van, and I booked it. I shut my phone off for the next week, and when I turned it on he asked where I was, and I said far away from you. I was dating this guy for like a week, and we were talking on the phone. While we were on the phone, he told me his female friend had come to his house and to stay on the phone and wait while he talked to her. So, he's having this other conversation, and in the meantime I talked to my mom for a minute. Mind you, I heard him talking to his friend before and after my conversation with my mom. I just wasn't actively listening to him. Then, he stopped talking to his friend and said on the phone to me, "Hello." I said it back, so he knew I was still there, and then he restarted his whole conversation, as if his friend had just then entered the house. As if he wasn't already supposedly talking to his friend for the past 5 minutes. As if he didn't just say hello on the phone to see if I was still there. TLDR, I figured out that he faked a whole conversation with another person over the phone to try and make me jealous. Dated a girl who was convinced that she was an immortal, like the Highlander, and that she was a part of a secret society who rode the lighting, and that she would show me her powers one day soon. So, I figured out that it was time to peace out as soon as possible, and man, did it get weird and clingy for like 2 to 3 weeks. Definitely a yikes in retrospect, lol. This is more like my ex and his family are all nutcases. TLDR, when I was 17 my ex was dating his ex-girlfriend the entire time we were dating, 8 months, and all of his family and our mutual friends and his other girlfriend knew he was dating us both. When I was 17, I met a group of friends that went to a different high school, same city, just a different high school. The night I met them, one of the guys in the group took a liking to me. He told me he had literally just broken up with his girlfriend that day, who also goes to the same school as him and his group of friends, and I thought it was a good idea to instantly start dating him. So, we were dating, saw each other all the time, went to his house, met his dad and grandparents. They loved me, hung out constantly and always hung out with his group of friends that I met that night. We all became super close to the point where that group of friends were now my best/closest friends. We all did pretty much everything together, and we were all best friends. So fast forward 8 months into our relationship. Throughout the entire relationship his ex-girlfriend kept trying to text him, call him, talk to him, etc. I was worried at first because they went to the same school, but I was also best friends with his closest friends and they went to school with them, and they would let me know if something was going on. So, about 8 months into our relationship, it was the day of his high school graduation. I didn't see him at all that day leading up to the graduation. Our graduations are held around 5 PM, so it was weird that we didn't hang out at all before, since it was kind of a big day. He said he was with family that flew in. He lived with his grandparents, and his mom and aunts flew in for his graduation, and he was spending time with them all day because he hadn't seen them in a long time. Cool. So I go to his graduation and sit with my friends, and a few rows down I see his family. His mom, aunts, grandparents, etc, and sitting with them is his ex-girlfriend. What? So after the ceremony, I was the first one to find him, so I went up to him to congratulate him, hug him, etc, and his aunts, mom, and grandma walk up with his ex-girlfriend and pull him away from me, and push him and his ex together, and start taking pictures of them together, as if they are a couple. I wish I could go back in time and knock some sense into my 17-year-old self. I didn't say anything. I was fuming in the inside, and I was with my best friend going off, but didn't say anything to them. So, afterwards, they were having a get together at his grandparents' house, and he promised me his ex wouldn't be there. So, I show up at his grandparents' house and guess who is there? His ex. It was the most awkward thing I've ever experienced. It was me, him, his ex, his 2 aunts, his mom and grandparents, and maybe 3 or 4 of our friends. No music, no food, just awkwardness. He wouldn't hug me, he wouldn't sit next to me, he wouldn't hold my hand in front of her. I don't really remember how it all escalated, but she ended up pulling out an engagement ring and said that he had given it to her earlier that day. I went out on the porch and cried. His aunt and mom, whom I had never met because they lived out of state, came out to talk to me and said that they had never heard him talk about me and thought that he was still dating his ex. Turns out he had been dating his ex the entire time. She would come to his house and visit his grandparents, hang out with him and his friends, the same friends I had become so close to. So every single person in his family and his friends were all lying to my face for 8 months. Except his mom and aunts, that didn't live in the same state. They would hold hands at school and he would walk her to class, the whole 9 yards. I really don't know how he pulled it off, because we hung out constantly to the point where we didn't have time to do anything else. His ex knew he was dating me too. Looking back on it, it was the weirdest thing I have ever experienced. I had started dating someone I hooked up with from Tinder. After about 3 weeks, I started feeling an uncomfortable sensation when I peed. STD never even occurred to me, so I just assumed it was a UT. Turns out she had herpes and neglected to tell me because she was on medication that suppressed it and made it harder to transfer. I went and got tested. Didn't have herpes, but instead contracted chlamydia from her. I then broke up with her and she said I was just like everyone else. That I didn't want to date her because she had herpes and that's why she didn't tell me. Me and my ex were together for 5 years. I should have seen the red flags. He isolated me from my friends, my family and basically anyone who I could turn to. I found out I was pregnant, had a beautiful son. After he was born thing went downhill fast. Ex started staying gone all the time. Cheated on me. Left me alone, knowing I was suffering from postpartum depression, telling me it was all in my head. Fast forward to the last year of our relationship, he had his coming to Jesus moment. Went totally crazy with it. Tried to force me to believe his views. Would start fights over it. Basically told our 4-year-old that God wanted us all dead. And the checked out and shacked up with some new girl. It was Alet. I used to think I was the one that was crazy, but looking back, I think he was at the least bipolar. I was on a first date with a guy and we were having an awesome time. We decided to be spontaneous and drive 2.5 hours to a different city in the middle of the night. About halfway into the drive he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm psychotic," and I laughed. And he was like, "Seriously though?" He is schizophrenic. He was unmedicated when we met. I helped him get back on the drugs and we are married now. Wow, you made it to the end. Thank you for watching, mate. Smash that like button and subscribe for more daily content.